let's hope for a good game on that one. And we're going to move on by looking at our Week 9 overview, which is located on the homepage of the Elite Picks app. And we are going to start with the quarterbacks. Talk to me, John. Anybody here stick out to you in terms of top ceiling, best matchup, or sleeper picks?
Well, my first two questions, who's playing the Jags and who's playing the Commanders? Obviously, the Giants are playing the Commanders this week. Not a lot there. I'd steer clear of that one. Daniel Jones might not even start. Who knows what they're going to announce this week. Brian Daboll was trashing him in a press conference for the first time kind of ever. So, but I really love Jalen Hurts going up against the Jaguars. Obviously, because of that Jacksonville defense, Jalen Hurts an obvious dual threat. Passing plus rushing yards could be a play there with him, but maybe even just straight up pass yards, with the crop of wide receivers that they have there. Jaden Daniels against the Giants. I know the Giants have a pretty good pass rush, but as you've seen, quarterbacks can get theirs against the Giants. And Jaden Daniels, one more week removed from that rib injury. Obviously, we all saw the magic that he had this past week. I think that he's been nothing short of electric this year. I think that continues. And then the last guy, I hope I'm not taking yours, but Kirk Cousins against Dallas. That Dallas defense has given up lots and lots of yards, just about every metric to everybody. Kirk has been having a great year with that crop of weapons they have there, so I love that matchup. Opponent ranked 27th. But what sticks out to you? What do you like here?
Yeah, I actually like Dak Prescott against the Falcons. He's had 2+ passing touchdowns in 4 of the last 5 games. Atlanta leads the NFL on highest completion percentage allowed, and they rank 25th in passing TDs allowed. So I think from a DFS standpoint, the Dak CD Lamb stack could be a good one. But obviously, I like Dak Prescott just alone as well, based off how the Falcons have played as of recently. So also, don't sleep on my man, Wacko for Flacco. He's played, I think, about 2 or 3 games this year, and he's obviously played well enough for them to think that he can take over the starting role. So Minnesota has shown that they have some leaks there in that secondary. As you saw with the Rams with Stafford, Kupp, and Puka, they were able to pick them apart. So they have some concerns over there that I think Flacco can certainly exploit with guys like Michael Pittman Jr., as well as Downs as well, their deep threat. So those are 2 guys that maybe aren't the highest ceiling individuals, but 2 that I like. And I guess the last tidbit I'll mention is definitely also like Jaden Daniels. The Giants have given up the most rushing yards to quarterbacks this year. So if that rib's feeling healthy, you may see Daniels have a lot of rushing yards, or like you said with Hurts, maybe that rushing and receiving or rushing and passing yards over could be something to look at.
For sure. Running backs. What looks good to you here, man? You want to start us off?
Yeah. I like Bijan Robinson here versus the Colts. He's really been coming into his own in terms of expectations that people had of him when he first came into the league. The last 4 games, he's had 20+ fantasy points. And if you look at the Cowboys, they can't stop a nosebleed. They're allowing 150+ rushing yards per game this season. And they've allowed 4 rushing touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. So whether you're looking at touchdown props, DFS, or even just receiving rushing props in that regard, really like Bijan Robinson. I think they're going to continue to feed him during this stretch.
For sure. I opened up my fantasy app this morning and I was excited to see that Alvin Kamara has like a 22 projected total in my ESPN fantasy league, and there he is right at the top of the top ceiling. Opponent ranked 32nd. He's playing against the Panthers. That's great. Derek Carr might be back this week. I think I saw him listed as questionable. Don't know what the status is on him yet. But either way, Alvin Kamara versus the Carolina Panthers, that's a great play. Like fantasy, rushing plus receiving, I think he gets back. He's been having some down weeks here. And I scored on some unders on some of the primetime games that they've had. But I think this is definitely a bounce back week for him for sure. But anything else on here look good? I mean, Saquon Barkley versus Jacksonville, that looks fantastic to me right off the get-go. I mean, he's had 2 great weeks back-to-back playing his former team, and then this past week also, who did they play this past week? But he had a ton of yards against them as well. So great matchup there.
I know they played the Giants. The week before.
Right.
Can't put on top of my head who they played this week. But yeah, since that Cleveland game where he had a lot of rushes, but didn't really.
Yeah, Cincinnati is who they played.
But yeah, that whole Eagles offense this week is definitely looking juicy. Obviously, as the resident Ram guy, I got to go with Kyren Williams. Did not have a rushing touchdown last week, but did have a receiving touchdown. So that now extends his touchdown streak to 9 regular season games. The last time he played the Seahawks, he had 2 rushing touchdowns. So put the mortgage on him probably scoring a touchdown in this game where the Seahawks were favored when the lines came out, and now they're actually underdogs at home, just to give you an idea of sort of where Vegas thinks that game may be going. So definitely love Kyren Williams here. And I would say that's about it. I mean, I do like Tony Pollard, but, quarterback's kind of been a revolving door between Rudolph and Levis, so that can certainly change things. But and obviously like Achane now with Tua back, you can kind of get him back to where he was, last year and in the beginning of the season when they have their QB1 in. So those are definitely the guys that stick out from a running back standpoint. But I would say it's a little sparse this week compared to, some other weeks.
Yeah, for sure. The guys at the top of each of these categories, besides Rico, probably are good plays to look at. Alvin and Saquon are probably pretty much the cream of the crop this week, I would say. But
definitely.
All right. Wide receivers. What looks good on here to you, Tyler?
Yeah, so definitely got to continue to pick on the Jaguars here. I absolutely love A.J. Brown. He's averaging the second most fantasy points per game among wide receivers in the last 4 games. The Jags have allowed the 4th most receiving yards in the NFL, and they've given up 6 touchdowns against opposing wide receivers in the last 4 games. So wide receivers have just absolutely feasted against the Jaguars. And A.J. Brown this season has just been absolutely dominant in all of his games. He's had 5+ receptions and 80+ receiving yards. And I believe his over-under this week right now is at 72.5. So I would definitely consider looking at that since he hasn't gone under 80 yards yet this season in a pretty favorable matchup. But he's obviously the one that sticks out to me. What about you?
Yeah, I mean, the flip side of that coin, also Devontae Smith with the same matchup against Jacksonville. I think both those guys are probably going to have favorable lines. Also, Malik Neighbors against Washington. That Washington defense gives up lots of yards. Giants are probably going to be down in that game because Washington can score points and will score points against that Giants defense. So Malik Neighbors decided until the 4th quarter to get all kinds of yards in this past game, making me really nervous. I think he had less than 40 yards going into the 4th quarter, but ended up pulling out his over for me last week. I think he gets involved a lot more early and often in this one for sure. But yeah, that's about it on this one too, as far as guys that stick out. Garrett Wilson against Houston. They have pretty good corners that can match up man to man. So we'll see how that matchup shakes out. Obviously, they've given up yards. Their opponent ranked 27th, but I know the Houston defense gave the Bills wide receivers fits, but. Yeah,
and don't want to leave the sleeper picks completely out of the blue here, but don't sleep on Calvin Ridley. Since DeAndre Hopkins left last week, Ridley had 15 targets and over 100 yards receiving. So he's obviously been a benefactor with Hopkins leaving. We'll see how he does this week, but just in terms of sheer volume, definitely somebody to keep an eye out. If you just lost Diggs, like myself in fantasy and looking for a guy maybe to replace or somebody that's been on your bench or even free agency that people have forgotten about, he could be a guy that's worth picking up because they're targeting him a lot since Hopkins has gone to the Chiefs.
Yeah. Never forget about Justin Jefferson either. I mean, he was up over 100 yards in the first half, I think, last week on that primetime game that we were watching. So that always a good bet for Justin. But. And
even I would say last but not least, or maybe least, I would monitor Jackson Smith and Jigba. I think some of that line movement with the Seahawks may have to do with DK Metcalf's status for that game. So if DK Metcalf is not playing against a Rams secondary that's pretty weak, I think you'll see Smith and Jigba definitely get a lot of those targets that Metcalf would maybe get.
Yeah, for sure. We'll see. Hopefully they can do it this week. They did not do a good job against the Bills, to my, not to my dismay, to the opposite of that, to my happiness, but it was a good game for me. So
It was a good game for me too as a Ram fan.
That's right.
So I liked it a lot.
That's right. Yeah, you guys are looking good now. So, but speaking of guys that looked good this past weekend, the tight ends were balling, and I know we're due for a down week now because it was like every team was engineering extra touches for their tight ends, and we forgot to check that it was tight ends week last week before we made our picks. And obviously, probably some of you out there did the same. But anyway, who looks good to you on here? I actually, it's so funny. The one tight end that I bet on their over this past week didn't hit. It was Brock Bowers was like 3 yards short of his over. So that was one bet that I lost. And on National Tight Ends Day, come on, Brock. Everyone else hit their over, but I don't know.
And that was against the Chiefs too, right? Who have
Yes.
have done poorly against tight ends. So
yep, it was a great match. That's the only reason I had put money on it. They had given up a ton of yards to the 49ers tight end there. Why I can't forget his name. I'm forgetting his name. George Kittle. I'll be okay. The week before, and so yeah. Anyway, who looks good on this list?
So yeah, the first guy that stuck out to me, Cade Otton, and it's not because he's playing against the Chiefs. It just happens to be coincidental there. But he's definitely the guy that's benefited the most since these injuries to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. In the last 2 games, he's had 181 yards and 2 touchdowns, and I think he's had right around maybe 8 or 10 targets each game. So this is definitely a guy who they're going to keep feeding in a game where they might be down or in a situation where they're going to have to throw the ball. And Otton is going to continue to hopefully get those looks. But he's the guy that I love. I played him in DFS this week, and he did great for me, as well as streamed him in one of my fantasy lineups. And really happy to see that Baker is getting him involved with their wide receiver core a bit banged up. But how about you, man? Anybody stick out in particular?
I think really the only person that I'd fade on this entire list, well, a couple of guys, I guess. I guess I would fade Jonnu Smith, Travis Kelce, and maybe Zach Ertz versus the Giants. But TJ Hawkinson coming back, that could be a good matchup. Obviously, you got to wait and see how he is. Usually I wait a couple weeks, guys coming back from injury. But Sam Laporta versus Green Bay, I think that's got big game written all over it possibly. So we'll see how that turns out. He's a little bit behind his touchdown pace from last year, which we all remember was ungodly. But yeah, I think he matches up well against that Green Bay defense. So Cole Kmet, been a little bit underwhelming this year, but sometimes he'll just be that guy who picks you up 20 fantasy points two weeks a year, something like that. So if you're really hard up for tight ends in fantasy, maybe you look at him. But yeah, I think the top of both of these lists is the best. Like you said, Cade Otton coming off a 2-touchdown week, and Brock Bowers, who has been probably one of the best rookie stories across the league this year so far. So,
and I definitely want to shout out a fellow Florida International University alumni, Jonnu Smith, there on that sleeper picks for tight ends. Actually lived in the same building as I did when I was in college there. But yeah, he's been getting surprisingly more targets, even with the full band back out there and together. He's still been getting a decent amount of targets even last week. So if you're looking for a guy to stream, or just somebody maybe looking for a low receptions prop or receiving yards prop, give my guy Jonnu Smith a look, because they've been giving him the ball. So like that from a sleeper pick standpoint.
For sure. I mean, if you're a defense in the NFL and you're going up against that Miami offense, he's got to be the last guy that you're worrying about, covering up. So that's an advantage offense in that regard. So love it.
Awesome. All right. Well, we're going to wrap it up today. I want to thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the podcast, please consider liking and subscribing. It really does help out the channel, and we appreciate it immensely. Also, leave us a comment and let us know what you'd like to see more of, or maybe what player props you're betting on this weekend. And be sure to take advantage of the free trial for the Elite Picks app. The link is in the description below. Good luck, everybody. Have a happy Halloween, and we will see you guys next time.